Hi Brollies, Marvin here from TechBroll.com, where we do unboxings, reviews, and sexy B-rolls. And today, I'm finally giving you guys my full review of the new ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE gaming laptop. A feature-packed gaming laptop that features dual display, dual power adapters, and a bunch of gaming and productivity features that makes this the ultimate gaming laptop. In this video, we'll discuss about its design, construction, features, performance, and everything it has to offer. With that being said, let's get into it. Alright guys, I've already done a dedicated unboxing video of the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE alongside all of its bundled peripherals, at least for the variant that will be available here in the Philippines. You can check it out here, but essentially, inside the massive box we have an ROG gaming laptop bag, an ROG Delta gaming headset, a 280 watts main power adapter, a 100 watts USB Type-C portable power adapter, an ROG Chakram Core gaming mouse, an ROG GC21 webcam, and the ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE gaming laptop itself. Now, these bundled peripherals vary depending on the region, but these are what you should expect if you're going to buy this here in the Philippines. Okay, so before we dig in deeper, let's break down the specifications real quick so that we can get that out of the way. For the variant that we have here, we have an AMD Ryzen 9 5900HX processor, partnered with an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3080 GPU with 32GB of 3200MHz RAM and two Samsung 1TB NVMe SSDs running in RAID 0. In terms of the display, we have a 4K IPS 120Hz 3ms main display and a trimmed 4K IPS touchscreen secondary display. I'll pop the complete specifications on the screen so that you can check it out. Now, let's take a closer look at the ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE. We have a lot of things to discuss here because I don't want to leave any information behind, so sit back, relax, and take it all in. Starting with the design and construction, here up top we have two different textures split by this diagonal line. We have a textured pattern and a smooth surface with an ROG Eye logo. We also have a subtle Republic of Gamers logo here on the back side, a couple of speaker grills, one on each side, and a subtle LED indicator right here at the center. It's so subtle that it blends right into the pattern. Now, flipping it all over at the bottom, we have 6 rubber feet to make this thing stay in place, 2 main ventilations, one on each side with this nice pattern design, 1 ventilation strip here with a Republic of Gamers logo below it, and another 2 speaker grills, one on each corner for the quad speakers Dolby Atmos surround sound. The chassis is made out of a combination of hard plastic materials and magnesium aluminide for a strong but relatively thin form factor. It weighs roughly around 2.4 kilograms and is just around 20.9mm thin. Now, before we crack the lid open, let's take a look around first and see what we have in terms of input and output ports. Starting here at the back side, we have some ports and 2 exhaust ventilation on each side. So we have an Ethernet port, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A port, and an HDMI 2.0B port. Looking at the left side, we have another exhaust ventilation here. We have a micro SD card slot, which is awesome for us content creators, the main power port, and a 3.5mm audio combo jack. Flipping it on the other side, we have yet another exhaust ventilation here, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port that also supports power delivery and DisplayPort 1.4. We also have 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A ports right here. So as you can tell, we have a pretty decent arsenal of IOs with this gaming laptop, and you don't have to worry about bringing a dongle. Lastly, looking here on the front side, as you can see, this gaming laptop is definitely thin, and we also have a cutout here at the center to allow us to open the lid much easier. Speaking of opening the lid, this laptop has a substantial weight to it, essentially making it stay in place when opening the lid using just one hand. So let's crack this open, shall we? Alright, so upon opening the lid, the first thing that stands out for me is of course the secondary display. So let's talk about it for a minute. The secondary display features a unique hinge that allows you to tilt and raise as you lift the lid open. It is actually quite trippy and awesome at the same time, and for sure took a lot of design planning and implementation to come up with something innovative like this. The hinge is strong enough to make the secondary display stay in place, even when you put pressure on it for the touchscreen functionality. Of course, it goes without saying that you have to keep your hands off the hinge for safety purposes, but it is also nice that we have a warning right here. The tilt angle is quite limited though, up to only around 13 degrees, and you might have to use a stand if you want to tilt the display a bit more. I feel like they could have made the hinge a bit more flexible, allowing it to manually tilt the secondary display further upwards. But at the same time, I also think that could cause an issue when you forget to tilt it back before closing the lid. That would be a total disaster, unless they can manage to make a design that even when you tilt it manually, it will still tilt down to surface when you close the lid. As for the secondary display panel itself, what we have here is the 3840 by 1100 IPS 60Hz 25 millisecond variant. So as you can see, resolution-wise, it is definitely on par with the main display with a trimmed 4K resolution. In terms of color accuracy, for a secondary and supplementary display like this, I'm actually impressed that it has a pretty decent 98% sRGB coverage, 73% NTSC, 77% Adobe RGB, and 77% P3 color gamut. The only thing that bothers me here is the anti-glare finish that I feel like is a bit too much, making the display kinda washed out. In terms of brightness levels, it can go as low as this and as bright as this, pretty substantial even in a completely dim environment. It also has a pretty cool boot up animation as you can see here that gives this gaming laptop that futuristic vibe. As for its functionality and features, aside from being a regular display panel, it also has a built-in control center here where you can toggle the brightness, app navigator, link to my ASUS, keyboard lock, and a bunch of different launchers that you can customize depending on your preference, and of course, the settings for the secondary display. Obviously, as a normal display, you can drag and drop things here like folders, programs, windows, and the like, and you can take advantage of this display for things like photo and video editing, gaming, and all the apps that supports this supplementary display. The possibilities are endless, and we could talk about all its use case scenarios for hours, but here's a quick glimpse of what's available out of the box. This makes this gaming laptop a highly versatile machine for any kind of task, may it be for productivity, gaming, multimedia consumption, and even for simple web browsing and multitasking. Now, while we're at it, let's talk about the main display. The variant that we have here is the 15.6-inch IPS 4K 3840 by 2160 resolution with a 120Hz refresh rate and 3 milliseconds response time. Now, unlike the secondary display, this one is not a touchscreen, but it is Pantone validated, so we should expect pretty good color accuracy. And true enough, as it has 100% sRGB coverage, 94% NTSC, 98% Adobe RGB, and 93% P3 color gamut. And with an IPS panel and 4K resolution, this makes this laptop ideal for photo and video editing, graphics work, and the like, while also being pretty decent for gaming with a 120Hz refresh rate and 3 milliseconds response time. The display has good viewing angles, vivid saturation, decent contrast levels, details, and sharpness. Although I feel like it could have been better if this is OLED for the deeper blacks, but of course, that would also significantly bump the price tag even further, so I'm good with this. As for the brightness levels, you can go as low as this and as bright as this. Here's a quick look at both the displays in a pretty dim environment, and as you can tell, the secondary display is significantly washed out compared to the main display. I don't know if there's a reason behind that, but there's that. Moving forward, it also features slim bezels, making good use of available space, and as you can tell, we don't have a built-in webcam since we have an included dedicated webcam with the ROG GC21. We also have an ROG Zephyrus logo here alongside I think a couple of microphones, and like most ASUS products, it also features AI noise cancellation. Speaking of good use of space, ROG was able to cram in a 60% keyboard and a trackpad with dedicated mouse buttons on the entire width of this laptop without wasting any space. The keyboard's layout is almost standard with smaller function rows up top, a larger spacebar, and small but dedicated arrow keys right here. The fonts are the typical ROG fonts, which is no surprise, and the keys themselves are pretty good with a decent 1.4mm of travel distance and substantial tactile feedback. It also has a perky RGB lighting with different lighting modes and is fairly bright even in a completely dark environment like this. Of course, it is also customizable via the ASUS Aura Sync app. As for the trackpad, it is equally awesome. Aside from being a normal trackpad, it can also function as a numpad with just a touch-of a button. Unfortunately, you cannot use the normal trackpad functionality while you are on the numpad mode, which is kinda weird because on ASUS ZenBooks, you can use both functionalities at the same time. Now, above the trackpad, we have a few shortcuts. We have the ASUS Armory shortcut, the on and off switch for the secondary display, the toggle for the arrow keys to function as navigation keys, and the power button. you will see an icon at the center of the display when you toggle these buttons. Of course, we also have some useful shortcuts here on the function rows that you can toggle by pressing them alongside the Fn key. And what's important here is the power mode shortcuts, wherein you can quickly change between silent, performance, and turbo mode, which we will test in depth later on our performance benchmarks. Alright guys, I think we're halfway there. But before we proceed with our performance benchmarks, let's talk about one of the most important features of the ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE in terms of the cooling solution. And this one is actually hidden from sight. So underneath the secondary display, there are a couple of 28.5mm high air intake vents that suck in fresh cold air into the internal components. The good thing here is that unlike the intake from the bottom of the chassis, it doesn't go through other warm components before reaching the CPU and the GPU, which significantly increases the thermal headroom. Alright guys, finally, let's move on to our performance benchmarks. I'll pop my benchmarking methodology on the screen so that you can check it out. This is actually important so that you can have an idea of how I came up with my results. I'll mention on each test if I did something different. Now, for our benchmarks, I actually had to test the ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE at least 3 times for normal applications and 27 times for each game. 3 different resolutions, 3 different power modes, and average of 3 runs. So please bear with me if this review took longer than expected and this video longer than normal, but yeah, let's get into it. Let's start with the AMD Ryzen 9 5900HX. Here are the Cinebench R15 and R20 scores, and as you can tell, there is a significant difference in terms of performance for each power mode. I'll explain more later, but yeah, these power modes actually do make a difference, not just some fancy toggles on the software. And now, here's the score in Geekbench 5 for the AMD Ryzen 9 5900HX, its integrated graphics, and the discrete RTX 3080 graphics in different APIs. In Blender, I tested this laptop for both Blender's built-in BMW benchmark and an actual render image using the latest Blender version 2.91 using the Red Autumn Forest demo file. Now, capping off our synthetic benchmarks, we have our 3D Mark benchmarks for Firestrike, Firestrike Ultra, TimeSpy, and TimeSpy Extreme so that you can have an idea of how the ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE performs in this popular and repeatable benchmark so that you can compare it with yours. Now, moving on to our real-world performance testings, in Adobe Premiere Pro with our standard 4K timeline, which is a 13.92-minute project, I was able to export our video using our standard 4K preset for just around 10 minutes in all of the 3 different power modes. And thanks to the 2 1TB NVMe SSD in RAID 0, generating thumbnails and scrubbing through the timeline is quite smooth even with 4K footages. So yeah, you can definitely reliably edit 4K videos on this laptop. Not to mention, it has a secondary display where you can place your timeline for more real estate for your clips and whatnot. Speaking of NVMe SSD RAID, what we have here is 2 Samsung 1TB NVMe SSDs running in RAID 0, and as you can tell, the read and write speeds are blazingly fast with 7,107 MB per second sequential read and 6,020 MB per second sequential write. This essentially means that the boot up sequence is just a few seconds and opening applications and games should take just a couple of breaths. Alright guys, moving on to our gaming benchmarks. Like I said, I had to test the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE 27 times for each game, 3 different resolutions, 3 different power modes, and an average of 3 runs so that you can have an idea of what you should expect in terms of performance, especially in different power modes because it affects thermals, noise levels, performance, and of course, battery life. Alright, so in CSGO, right off the bat, I can definitely say that the silent mode holds back the performance quite significantly, and I believe it does that by limiting the clock speeds and fan speeds in order to maintain a certain noise level. I'll give you a quick sound test later, but definitely if you're gaming, it goes without saying that you should only choose either the performance mode or the no-holds-barred turbo mode. As for the actual performance in CSGO, the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE can easily handle it up to 4K resolution in high to very high settings and will certainly take advantage of its 120Hz display. Now in Valorant, pretty much the same thing. You can game on this laptop up to 4K resolution at maximum settings. The same goes in Rainbow Six Siege. It can still reach up to 120 FPS for that 120Hz refresh rate even at 4K resolution and in ultra settings. To be honest, this is actually to be expected given the powerful hardware inside, especially with an AMD Ryzen 5 5900X processor and an RTX 3080 graphics. Moving on to our last game, which is Cyberpunk 2077, I had to test this game a whopping 42 times because I wanted to test this with ray tracing and what I believe is the sweet spot settings. Alright, so let's start with ray tracing medium with DLSS quality, because to be honest, it's kinda hard to run this game with RTX without DLSS, even on a desktop. So yeah. And as you can see, the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE can run this game with ray tracing in 1080p or even at 1440p, but struggles really hard in 4K resolution. Now, I wanted to test if we can play at 4K resolution if we disable ray tracing, but apparently, even with DLSS quality at ultra settings, it's still barely playable at around 30 plus FPS. And after several further testings, I feel like the best balance settings in terms of visual quality and decent performance at 4K resolution is medium settings with DLSS quality and of course RTX disabled. With this, we still have the crispiness of the 4K resolution, albeit with the aid of DLSS, with a decent image quality of medium settings, with decent frame rates of around 60 FPS. Now, with our test results and comparing both the performance mode and the turbo mode, I honestly feel like you can get away with just the performance mode for a good balance in terms of performance, noise levels, and power consumption, especially if you want to be more discreet and if you want to game on the go. Otherwise, if you game while your laptop is plugged in and you don't care about noise, let's say you use a headset, then by any means go turbo. Now, one thing that I personally like about the design of this laptop in terms of gaming and overall use is the placement of the keyboard, which as you can tell is away from most of the heat sources, and as per my experience, you'll barely feel the heat from this laptop at all. Alright guys, moving on to the final stretch of our benchmarks, let's talk about thermals, power draw, and battery life. Here are the thermals for Cinebench R15 and R20, so that you can have an idea of how the cooling solution of the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE handle the AMD Ryzen 5 5900HX. As you can see, the temperatures definitely spike hot at max, but if you look at the average temps for the duration of our benchmark, it is still pretty decent for the most part, except in turbo mode in Cinebench R20. Again, turbo mode is I think the no holds barred setting, giving you the most performance regardless of noise. Now looking at our real world application, while exporting our standard 4K video in Adobe Premiere Pro, the temps for the AMD Ryzen 5 5900HX does spike up to 83 degrees, but is well maintained for the duration of our export process with an average temperature of around 65 to 74 degrees, which in my opinion is pretty decent for this task. Of course, our graphics also do their part for the export process, so here are their thermals. As for the thermal performance while gaming, I'd say it is pretty well managed for all our games, and this is with the turbo setting. Now, when it comes to power consumption, we have two options in terms of delivering juice to this laptop. One is via the massive and heavy 280 watts power adapter, and the other one is via the lightweight and compact 100 watts USB Type-C power adapter. And now, here's how they differ in terms of idle power draw for our three different power modes. Turbo mode is not available using the 100 watts USB Type-C power adapter, and when you plug in the 280 watts power adapter, the power mode will automatically switch to turbo mode. And now, here's how the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE draws power during load while playing Cyberpunk 2077. Essentially, the 100 watts power adapter runs at performance mode, while the 280 watts power adapter runs at turbo mode. And last but not the least, in terms of battery life, using the PC Mark X battery life benchmark for various use case scenarios, the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE was able to last around 3.55 hours in modern office, which essentially simulates productivity in writing, web browsing, and video conferencing. It was able to last around 3.48 hours in the HD video loop test and 1.35 hours in the gaming test. Now, for good measure, I also did my own video loop test, playing YouTube videos until the battery runs out. It was able to last around the same duration of 3.4 hours. Take note that this is in the worst possible scenario, with maximum screen brightness, maximum volume, and with dual display turned on. So essentially, dialing these settings down will yield a longer battery life. Charging the battery using the 280 watts power adapter took only around 1.33 hours. Alright guys, I think that's pretty much it for my review of the ASUS ROG Zephyrus Duo 15 SE, and hopefully you get something useful out of this review, especially if you're looking to purchase this quite expensive gaming laptop. This particular variant that we have here is priced around 254,995 pesos, which is absolutely insane, but for the right person with the right use case scenarios and budget, I still think this gaming laptop is a good all-around mobile device that can pretty much replace a desktop PC. It is versatile, portable, powerful, and highly capable in terms of performance, noise levels, battery life, and without much compromise and drawbacks aside from the steep price tag. This is definitely not for everyone, but again, for the right target market space, it brings a lot to the table. And there you have it guys, thank you for watching. Huge thanks to ASUS ROG for this opportunity to experience something awesome like this. You can get this once available from the link below. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you like this, and see you next time. Have a great day guys, you're awesome.